he was always sort of had that, he was a fanboy, himself. He kind of was wild-eyed and couldn't believe some of the people he was hanging out with. There was a bright, blue skies kind of demeanor and comedic and funny, and good with a quip. And so you put all those things together, it kind of tells you the tone it wants to be, I think, a lot of times.
And when you have a show that's worked so hard to be as rooted as Arrow is, and then you're suddenly introducing the Flash, and now you've got superpowers on the show, how hard is it to maintain the sort of the rootedness without Pandora's box being open?
Yeah, I think that was our major concern, was the ground, maintaining the believability and the groundedness. You're still in a heightened world, and so you kind of, it was like introducing an organ to a body, I think. In part, so much of that is sold with Grant, and so much of it is sold with him, because when he came into the Arrow universe, we knew if you could believe him and want to believe in him and what sort of happened to him, and then the same thing when he kind of transferred over to his own show, you would want to just believe in that world. I really believe that. I think that it's our connection with the actors that give it the most grounding.
Does the powers thing become an issue on Arrow now? Now it's sort of, everyone's going to be expecting more superpowers.
I think because in Arrow and its DNA, it's got that epic crime drama kind of element. Occasionally we will have the Mirror Crew. We'll have elements that come through. We've got Ray Palmer on the show this year. Some people know where that goes, and so there'll be those kind of elements. But we don't change the algorithm too much, And certainly there'll be, hopefully, in the crossovers of Flash and some of his team come over. Again, you'll sort of see those worlds colliding. The best representation of that for me always was the comic books. They would do that, but it didn't overtake the world. And then when they would go away, the comic book could sort of become itself again. And I think that's our hope, is to achieve that.
Can you tell us a little about the diversity in this cast and the characters? Obviously, in comics, for a long time, it's been very much white heterosexual people, and it seems like there was an effort made to bring in diversity into the show.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I want the shows I work on to look like and reflect America, the place I live, and you wouldn't be in a coffee shop and have it be all white, and that would be weird. You'd get freaked out, I think. So when you have a show that's all white, it feels weird. And so, anyway, so that being said, that was our conscious kind of effort, and particularly knowing we wanted to build out the West family, and where, if we're fortunate enough, where that might go, in terms of Wally West and everybody knowing he's Kid Flash, and so we said that from the outset with DC, and they said, well, that's interesting because we've been talking about not wanting, some of our larger characters to just be white too, and so we said, well, we're going to make the West family African American, and they said, great, and in terms of Cisco, he was always a great character that they had even recently brought back in DC, and again, it just was, so much. I think this particular show has that kind of heart and soul of like a kid who feels different, and felt different as a kid, and now that difference means he's got abilities and powers, and it's empowering. And I think it's just something we wanted the show to kind of be open in that way and reflect all of our differences.
On those differences, you're introducing David Singh character, great character in the comic, which is awesome, but there's another one you might be introducing as well, that's also from the DCU, and I have a couple ideas, but can you embellish on that?
I don't want to give away too much, in part sometimes because we haven't locked it down yet what episode it would be, and so sometimes it gets changed for one reason or another, and then I feel like I disappoint people. But the truth is, in these 13, we're desperately trying to do it. We had, even in one of the original drafts of the script, we had another character who we just had to remove for time. And so that's the character we're kind of hoping that we can kind of make our way to.
How do you decide what you want to bring in from the original Flash story versus what you're like, oh, maybe I want to do that?
Like what elements or characters?
Exactly.
Sometimes it's something really specific, like it's just a character or a scene. Sometimes it's even like, this is the first one where it's like, even sometimes in the titles of the episodes, I'm like, you kind of, like, we have episode titles or things like Grodd, that we hint at if you watch the comic book. So sometimes it's like little small geeky things. Sometimes it's larger characters. Sometimes it's a moment. We were looking through old Flash comic books on the floor yesterday, and there was the first super punch, and like we're literally writing the episode right now with the first super punch in it, where he has to take out a character, he has to kind of run about 2 miles away, and then but if he doesn't land, and the fun of this show is the science of it, and he's got this sort of like geek squad around him to sort of help him figure out the science of, well, if you don't land your fist just right or just accurately, you'll actually dissolve every bone in your body. Now you're the Flash, so you'll re-heal, but you may not re-heal from if you smash your hands to smithereens. So there's all that kind of fun stuff. So sometimes it literally is just a moment, and sometimes it's a character. It's between Jeff Johns, who's one of the co-creators of the show and has written really relaunched the character, and Andrew, who is a comic book fanatic. I'm probably the least comic book knowledgeable of those three for sure, and so for me it's just the dynamics and the character dynamics that we feel like will yield great stories to come too. So it's setting up that kind of stuff.
What about the crossover thing before? If you have a show where you have Flash and Firestorm, and a show where Arrow and potentially the Atom exists,
yes.
Do you foresee something down the road where there could be like this big story that involves those kinds of 4 heroes?
I mean, that would be a dream. We like to sort of build one block at a time and then hope that it's really successful. Yeah. But if you don't, I think just even with the season or storylines, if we don't have someplace in our minds that we hope to go, but those were, the first comic books that when I was 13, it was going through the Crisis of Infinite Earths on DC, and that was I know where they are in my house, and I know how quickly I could get to them in a fire. So that and I don't have a lot of other items like that in my house. I've actually thought about, all right, so if that happened, I would go there first, and because they were so evocative, and having them all together was what was so evocative, and so that would be it would be a dream, but we have to be really successful individually first.
I thought casting John from the original Flash show was an inspired choice. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if you might be looking at anybody else from that show down the road?
A couple things. So yeah, John and I actually worked together on Dawson's Creek, so I knew him personally. So and we all obviously associate him so much with that show, and all really were admirers of the show. So we always said, well, I wonder if there's a great way to put him in there. And then when we knew what we wanted to kind of do with Barry's father, it just seemed like, wow, that would be the sort of the perfect ideal thing. And we went to him and asked, and it was one of those things where you ask, and then all of a sudden you get a yes, and you're all so excited you kind of can't believe it. So it really worked out nicely that way. We talked about other people we'd love to have from the original series, but also they had a couple of characters on this series. Now I haven't rewatched every episode recently, but they had a couple of characters that I haven't even seen in the comic book, and something that would be fun would be to maybe bring on a character that was only in the series but maybe not in the books, something like that as well. But we haven't really talked more beyond that.
Sorry, we need to end it. We're going to
Great.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.